Thank you, Joanne.
Bob, that must be a lonely building.
Well, Annie was there earlier today, so all the throngs of starstruck, fans have left the premises, and just me.
Who was hopping this afternoon? Giovanna was there. I was there.
Okay, I clarify that. I'm sorry.
It was a little weird because when I go in, I'm so used to being alone. It's quiet. I felt like there's no one.
Except for the mice, Joanne. You usually have the mice around you.
No, I haven't seen any. Trust me, I won't be going in once I see one.
I'm sorry.
Joanne, are we
social...
good? Oh, sorry. Are we good for? I'm sorry. I just saw it's 5:30, guys. I apologize.
Christian, come on in now.
We can call the meeting to order because we have a quorum right now. So
Yeah, that's fine.
you texted him. I think we should start.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yep. All right. I'm gonna call me order. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is
Paul, the
safe and
announcement's still on LMC TV.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you guys, but I can't. We're good to go.
We're good to go. Great. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and healthy out there in the community. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We're going to start out with the items to be removed from consent agenda. If a board member wishes to remove an item on the consent agenda for further discussion, a motion to remove item X from the consent agenda must be made. However, once a motion and second are made for the consent agenda items listed below, simple questions can be asked regarding any of them, as you would normally do for individual resolutions. Now move to the consent agenda. A, approval of minutes from the 4/21/20 board meeting. B, approval of personnel agenda. C, approval of budget transfers. D, acceptance of arrangements by appropriate special programs and services as recommended by the CSC, CPSC. And E, acceptance of gifts and donations. Recommended action, the Board of Education approves the recommended consent agenda items A through E is listed in the attachments and above. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And thank you regarding the gifts and donations for $6,073.32 from Celia Felsher for the Jadian Alexander Scholarship Fund. So thank you, Celia, for that donation. And then we are going to move right now to Bob.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Before we turn it over to just our summary of our recommended budget for 2020-21 school year, I just want to start off the meeting by acknowledging that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, National Teacher Appreciation Week, and recognize the commitment and professionalism of our faculty, our staff, our administrators. I just sent out a few articles from Harvard Business Review about leading during a crisis. And I want to say that the steadfast resolve of our teachers, their commitment to students and families, to our broader community is phenomenal. And I just want to acknowledge that this evening. I also want to set a context for the budget discussion tonight. I think it's important to recognize that as Governor Cuomo announced last Friday the closure of the schools for the remainder of the year, he also pointed to the necessary planning that will be required for school districts to think about returning to a regular school calendar in September. And I think from a budgeting perspective, a strategic planning perspective, there are a lot of unknowns. And we as an organization need to recognize, one, what have we learned from remote learning this past spring? What are the lessons learned? Where in the organization have we thrived relative to kind of adapting to this brave new world, which will more than likely continue moving forward? Two, how do we plan effectively with our staff for a variety of scenarios of coming back under the what I would say the continuing challenge of public health restrictions, of being able to create a hybrid environment where we're developing a distance learning model that can be sustained over time, that provides the faculty with the necessary tools or tool kit, and allows them to feel comfortable in providing what I would say live instruction for an extended period of time, if necessary, or some combination as well. And so as the board considers adopting this budget, we recognize that the go slow approach, or the ability to kind of be sensitive to the economic hardship and the public health crisis that has really directly impacted our broader community, that we allow ourselves the flexibility to be nimble as an organization, to kind of react to and respond to a series of unknowns that will not be clear, both on a financial side and an educational delivery side for maybe weeks, months to come. And so I think that's important. I would say that we always want to work on the assumption of planning for the worst and hoping for the best. And I think this spring, in so many respects, there's been a lot of bright spots across the system, and a lot of personalization and personal care by educators that I think is extraordinary and will help build the foundation for going forward. So that to me is really setting the table for what comes next. And I think it's important that we not lose sight of that there are a lot of unanswered questions relating to the alignment of resources, our budget, our operating budget, and our ability to maintain and invest in a public education system moving forward, not only this year, but in years to come. I will spend more time on a slide that talks about the budget process, because I think it's equally important to comment that we are budgeting for more than 1 year, that this is not necessarily just an isolated operating budget, that any decision the board makes relative to funding has a lasting impact relative to future budgets, and especially knowing how the tax cap formula works, and what we look forward in terms of as things may settle down and continue to see new families arrive in the system as well. So with that, Sylvia, I don't know if you have the PowerPoint available that you can kind of scroll through. Thank you. So tonight we hope to summarize the budget for the board and the community, kind of revisit where we left off, seek and answer any questions the board may have about the recommended budget, and then respond to the next steps relative to the board's consideration of adopting a budget and the property tax report card. I've said throughout this process that we need to align the financial plan with our mission. And I don't want to necessarily kind of revisit the mission statement, but I think it should serve as a guidepost for all of our discussions. I think more than ever, given the uncertainty of our world, what lies ahead, that this idea of an intellectual engagement, appreciation of learning, and preparing students to function in a responsible manner on a global plane is ever more so pertinent to our lives and should guide us going forward. The budgetary guiding principles that are also important to us is how do we nurture the hearts and minds of our students to be responsible citizens, to I think thrive socially and emotionally. I think one of the things the lessons learned for the last few months is that when we isolate and when we lose the sense of social interaction and the learning that comes from being together, it's even more so important to focus in on the well-being of our students and our faculty and our community members and our parents, who have recognized that living under one roof and kind of wearing multiple hats creates a lot of stress and pressures as well. But really getting to the heart of understanding the whole child is important in a guiding principle for this budget. I also think it's important that we emphasize what I would say is continuing commitment to transparency, to fiscal responsibility. As I said in the beginning, we have to recognize as a co-governance body the economic hardship that is certainly directly felt by our community. Certainly the uncertainty about whether the economy will come back in the near term and how our budgets are supported by our residents and our taxpayers as well. And we also want to invest wisely in our programs and ensure that we maintain for the long term a sustainable and quality school system. If we can transition, Sylvia. Oh. Sylvia? I think Sylvia's having internet problems.
Looks like she's frozen, yeah, and if
Yeah.
she's, if it's her screen, let's see.
Okay, so I see if I can't start the screen while the other participants. So let me
You know
go
what?
on.
I'll text her and ask her if she can make you the host, Bob, while you're talking.
Sure. So this is part and parcel of remote planning for public meetings.
I'm excited to see there's some meat available there.
Yes.
The
well,
same presentation that we were emailed.
Yes, it is.
You want me
Yes,
to,
it is.
if I could share it out and move it along for you?
That would be great,
Okay.
because right now I'm sharing Sylvia's screen, so. Sylvia's back.
I just got back in.
Okay.
Thanks, Sylvia.
Okay.
So Sylvia, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. I want to transition to discuss just a recap the budget development process. Obviously, there's been a lot of planning at all levels of the system.
That's helpful.
We have worked hard to kind of craft and revise this budget over the course of the last 2 months. I think we've commented on that. We've spent the last 2 or 3 budget meetings or board meetings focusing on potential changes to revenue at the state aid level and other revenue or related revenue streams like sales tax and use of facilities. We've looked at and tried to understand the budget in the context of our reserves in our, what I would say, long-term fiscal challenges relative to tax surcharges and maintaining an appropriate reserve as well. And I think I've added one other piece to this, and that is to understand the fluidity and the unknowns relating to the economic and health crisis as a means to provide flexibility within the budget during the course of the next several months and as we start school to allow us to react, adjust, and kind of manage programs and learning experiences as the conditions and requirements become known. I said at the beginning that there are a lot of unknowns relative to how school will proceed next year. One of the things I've suggested to the board as we've considered where we are with this budget is that we have the opportunity to adopt a budget based on some guiding principles and expectations of investment in program and enrollment and quality, and then can afford ourselves the opportunity to adjust downward as more information becomes available, as decisions at the state level come into play or the federal government. And so this idea of having some level of nimbleness, flexibility built into it, there are a lot of unknowns relative to support for students, for the types of environments or hybrid model that we would support relative to having regular school, having school affected by health restrictions, public health restrictions, and or the need to invest fully in remote learning in a way that is sustainable. So I just add that to our consideration as we go through the budget. Just to touch on really what has been the focus on the revenue side, we've touched on the question marks around state aid and the what I would say benchmarks or milestones that we need to be mindful of, where Governor Cuomo and his financial team will make determinations of fiscal impact relative to the state budget. We've touched on the potential impact of sales tax on the first half of the year, on the potential for it recovering on the backside, but the adjustments there, as well as what I would say is our dependence on rental facilities as a revenue stream. So, I just to kind of reinforce this issue that there are a lot of unknowns on the revenue side that we need to be mindful of as we move forward, but nothing that we need to necessarily act upon now. We talked about these benchmarks that Governor Cuomo has stated publicly about the impact of what the dollar equivalent would be for a 10% reduction in aid, 20% and a 50% in terms of understanding in the totals between state aid, sales tax facilities, what we could anticipate or plan for. And we have started the process to understand what a 10% reduction in revenue would mean as it relates to programs and services and so on and so forth. As I mentioned, and we discussed at length last time, we've just finished that first timeline or time frame for state budget review. We believe within the next few days, we'll hear from the governor in some form about staying the course or making some adjustments. Similarly, there's that second timeline benchmark of May 1st to June 30th, where they will look at some revenue streams and then report out in terms of any adjustment of state aid. And, not to get too far, but in terms of sharing with the community how they're going to determine and the formulas they're going to use to kind of make final, what I would say, aid determinations overall. Unless the board has any specific questions, we've covered this before, but we felt it was important for the community to see it as well. As we've said throughout, there are several areas of expenditures that are really influencing or driving this budget. Employee health benefits as a category certainly has the biggest impact. We've recently shifted to a regional consortium for prescription and employee health insurance, and we believe over the course of the next year and in the years ahead that we'll be able to manage our commitment to provide benefits for our employees in a cost-effective manner. We've talked at length about the impact of special ed programs and services and the significant increase in the need to respond to tuition and related services in this budget, as well as the unknowns around transportations and bidding a new transportation contract and the expectations of increased cost. So those are the three areas that really account for a $2.7 million increase in the budget, or really the major factors of that. I would say that, interesting enough, we've touched on salaries and program expenditures that really have not really in some ways resulted in a significant increase overall in this budget. So based on what I would say is our signed contracts and commitments for salaries for next year, actual expenditures for in this year and predictable expenditures, it really gets back to benefits, special ed services, and transportation as the cost centers that are causing the budget to grow.
Bob, would you just explain to the public about what the tuition line is so people understand in special ed?
Sure. Nora, would you like to touch on that?
Myself. So remember we talked about initially the fact that, as we look at those trends that we've shared in data over the last 3 years, those are fairly consistent. So there's a lot of consistencies, right? Being the percentage of kids that we classify, the types of services we're offering, et cetera. But what changes proportionately, of course, is as enrollment has gone up, so have the number of classified students as well. In addition, over the summer months, we also have a good number of families that have moved here, which we've talked about also. But specifically, when you talk about tuition and related services, the number of students that we are placing out of district in BOCES programs has gone up. And those are programs that really are geared towards secondary students who have had some sudden and unpredictable changes in mental health status and behavior. Our placement in approved private schools, however, continues to go down, which is good as well. The other increases here are around related services, especially occupational therapy, students' sensory needs. And that's particularly connected to the enrollment going up and the number of students going up. So the needs of OT go up as well. And there are some additional medical needs. We have kids who are quite medically involved now in our schools, and we welcome them there, but kids who need one-on-one nurses to attend the school day, et cetera. And that's the bulk of it, besides some little raises here or there in our consultant lines. for psychiatric
Thank you.
services, et cetera.
Thanks, Nora. Okay, so as I mentioned, when we move on to just the summary of expenditures, the general support instruction, you'll see overall instruction, which is really the bulk of our budget, is insignificant in terms of the overall increase based on that category. It really gets back to the three areas we talked about that add up to the 2.7 million increase on the budget for next year. So to summarize, we are presenting to the board for consideration a budget.
Bob, please go back to that slide. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Steve.
So here, though, I just want to make sure that people can clear the slide, because I know there's some people in the community who wonder about, do we show budget? Do we show costs? This really does show that the 1920 projected costs, so people can see that it's pretty clear. And one can see that the proposed budget in 2021 is very close to the 1920 proposed actual costs. We're now in May, so this is gonna be pretty close. Is that right, Sylvia?
Hi, Steve, thanks. This was the projected costs were from a little bit earlier, but yes, and the projected
Close
costs
enough. I'm just saying.
are greater than the budget as a result of budget increases for tax tertiary workers and workers' comp.
But on the whole,
I'm just trying to say,
projections-
take a look at the
Yeah,
2021 proposed budget versus the projected costs.
It's only
It's actually a much smaller increase. Is that correct?
correct, 430,000.
But the percent is what? It's less than 1%.
Oh, yes, less than 1%.
And I also, I just want to mention, we have now continued the last several years to budget very close to actuals. We have a track record, certainly from 2012 to 2019 of budgeting close to actual relative to 99.9% of our actual budget. So the biggest change structurally in this is to not rely on fund balance to be able to maintain budgets in the following year, but to actually have a close understanding of actual expenditures and be able to budget appropriately based on needs. And the other thing, if I can just say, this also, when we talk about this budget, it's a financial plan that's looking 10 months into the future. And, even when we think about area of student support services, we can have new registrations and really mandated services that come in 3 to 4 or 5 students that really have an adverse impact on our planning. And so we need to build in what I would say some flexibility and understanding that this is a blueprint for what we anticipate, but we have the ability to react given our historicals over time.
And Bob, if I can just add rather, not only kids who move into our district, but our students who are out there now that maybe are not even classified, who are really starting to have mental health issues due to the traumatic impact of COVID-19.
Nora, one question. So going back to the related services and tuition for BOCES, are those residential programs or not?
No, they're not. They're day programs. We only have 4 students that are in residential placements, and they've been there for quite some number of years.
Okay. Because I was asking because of the higher percentage that we now have to pay for residential placements.
Right.
That our reimbursement has been.
Absolutely, Rena, that's right. But some of these programs at BOCES are not cheap, even though they're day programs, because the kids that are there are so involved. And remember, some of our students who have been there over time are very medically fragile and receive a lot of services, even though they come home at night.
I'm sorry, Nora, and really quick, what is the percentage of students that are receiving services?
You know what, that's hard for me to give you offhand without looking at the actual numbers. Our classification rate is consistent around between 12 and 13%, which is relatively low if you compare it to neighboring facilities. But so if you look at that, I think that's the most important thing. The overall percentage, quite honestly, I would have to look. I don't want to miss.
And also, Nora, you can, generally in terms of the total number of students who receive services, is what? Special ed services by itself.
Over 950 students pre-K
Right.
to 12. That's why I don't want to misquote a percentage, because it's,
Right.
And
it's a
that's not
significant
even
number of
mentioning the number of students that touch,
Right.
that even come across. Yeah.
Right, and some of those students might just receive speech, and some of those students might receive OT, PT, speech, special class. So it's not even the sheer numbers; it's the intensity, the frequency, and all those things that factor in.
Thank you, Nora.
So to summarize, the budget we've recommended or putting forward to the board is $142,609,792. As I mentioned, it reflects a $2.7 million roughly budget to budget increase, or 1.96% increase budget to budget. The tax levy required to support the budget would be $128,749,080. It reflects a $2.2 million increase in tax levy, or a 1.776% increase. Projected tax rate is $13.73. The assessed value per 1,000 is 0.20, with an estimated tax rate increase of 1.49%. It translates on the average assessed home to an additional $250 per year. And that's where we're at. Again, I want to emphasize that there's been a lot of consideration in where we started. Difficult decisions about reductions in expenditures to lower the budget by $1.4 million. Trying to understand how we maintain and invest in programs and experiences, address the issues of federal and state mandates, maintain class sizes, and provide ourselves the flexibility of a financial plan for operating the schools in September. I recognize and certainly understand the conditions that we are experienced now and most likely into the future. And I will just reinforce the need to provide the flexibility to adjust the budget as we move forward into the next few months and in through the school year. So any questions at this point by the board?
Real quickly, Bob, I'm just going to remind the community at large that if anybody has any questions, it's board@mamkschools.org. But now I think, I agree with Bob. I think it's time to any questions from any of the board members.
I want to start off with just a comment. I want to just jump on to what Bob said about it being Teacher Appreciation Week. I know that these weeks, are marked in the calendar, and various PTAs find assorted ways to thank their teachers. We're sorry that we can't thank you in person, but to each and every one of you, we know how hard our teachers and staff are working, our custodians, we just so appreciate all that you're doing and will continue to do. We've heard about some of the wonderful ways that teachers are reaching out to students and making that personal connection, whether it be connecting with a student in the morning who's known to have anxiety about participating in online learning. There have been some really wonderful and impactful things that certain teachers are doing. So, to all of you, we know that you are juggling your own families, and thank you. And the videos, the PTA videos, I encourage people to watch. The MAS video had me smiling for several hours after I watched it. I thought it was terrific, and I saw the central video. So thanks to the PTAs for putting up all those videos. I know Chatsworth has had a video, and Murray. So thank you all for your creativity and recognition of how hard these teachers are working and what it's like to actually work with your students at home and have them explain math to you. So that being said, moving ahead to budget questions, I want to go back to something that you said, Bob, about all of the unknowns on the revenue side, yeah, and the unknowns on the cost side as well. So for example, our busing takes into account our busing and the transportation costs take into account, what we currently know. It does not take into account what might be required when school reopens, in terms of social distancing, enhanced cleaning requirements, which would also be required for school. As Nora pointed out, the increased needs that we might be faced with, compensatory services that might be required when we start the year. So when you made the statement, nothing that we need to act upon now, given the reduction in revenues. For me, I kept on going back and forth on whether we reduce the budget now and just say, okay, we're gonna cut it back, or whether to stick to what we currently have, saying this is the budget that best meets our students' needs and responds to the pressures that our community is under. I think it's important to point out that we've already reduced this budget by, I think, $1.4 million from where it originally stood, and lines have been closely looked at. And where I came out, just to circle back, is I agree that there's nothing that we need to change right now, because I want to be able to give you the most, you being you and all of our administrators and teachers, the most flexibility to address the needs that come up. And I'm afraid that if we cut this budget way back, we will not have that flexibility. It's not as if we have pots of money hidden off somewhere. We have been budgeting very close to actuals. That has been a change from back, from way back, what is it, when you pointed out, Bob?
More than 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10, 12 years ago. So, we need to be I feel that we need to be very, very careful to provide the flexibility to be able to meet whatever's coming down the pike as we move forward. So I think that this is a fiscally responsible budget. I know that that's any increases are difficult right now in any costs for many people. I know that there are people who've lost jobs, who look at their tax bills, and we are in much more difficult times. But I feel that to cut it back further now could potentially damage our educational program and ability to meet the needs in the way we have traditionally done for students moving forward.
I agree with what Rena was saying, and I think the issue that we have to say on this budget is we don't really know where we're going to end up, let alone come May 15th or come to, in December, in September or December. And I think what we've always tried to do, the budgets, and especially in the last few years with Sylvia and Bob doing this, is we're trying to create a budget that gives the students of our district the resources they need to succeed at the level that we want them to succeed. It gives the teachers, the staff, the administrators the opportunities to invest more in the curriculum. And last and definitely not least, we try to be respectful of the taxpayers and the community, of what's an appropriate level. And I think, as Rena said, we know this is a really difficult time. None of this are making light of this. I think about my mom, who's lived in this district now for 65 years. And, she's on a fixed income, and, any increase is not a positive. But we've got to, at the same time, protect what has made this district so great over, the reason why my mother moved here 65 years ago and the reason why I decided to raise my kids here 24 years ago. So we know this is not an easy time for many people. And, I think we're also, but if we cut stuff now, it puts, we still might be needing to cut stuff in 2 weeks or 6 weeks or longer. And I just think that you guys have done a really admirable job. And I think, I hope that things get less bad, but I don't think any of us expect that to be the norm.
Okay. So I had a question or perhaps a suggestion. So first of all, Bob, I love the remarks when you start your presentation, talking about that we are not planning just for a year. We really focus for the future budgets, and also to have in mind that it's going to be an economic hardship not only this year, maybe 3 years ahead. And I would like to also mention something great in one of the articles that you shared with us last week. Like we're gonna have really some years to recover from this pandemic. And one of the key points that they mentioned in there, it was that equity is gonna be key, since the underprivileged kids are gonna be somewhat more affected. So I just thinking in the guiding principles of this budget, because programs become alive in the budget, if we can include something about equity in the guiding principles, because it's something that we've been discussing. We have 2 study sessions this year about equity, and I think that equity is something that is in our mission. So how we can include that also in the guiding principles and the budget?
Thank you, Gladys. And I certainly will add to the guiding principles. I would say that equity has been front and center, certainly through my tenure. I can look at opportunities to create equitable opportunity to learn, and just focusing on all aspects of program and experience. And I think, our conversations recently, even about remote learning, has really focused our attention through the equity lens, relative to, it's not just about providing devices, but the equity piece understands the conditions that some of our families and students are operating under, to kind of access learning, and how we understand and kind of appreciate the multiple perspectives that really will give us insight how we can help students make progress and succeed. So that I would say equity is a starting point for us. And it's in some ways, it's determined and in some ways driven by our overall mission as a community, and our community partners, and how we view access to public education. So I appreciate that suggestion.
Can I just say, I've been on the board for 6 years now, and I'm coming into my real home stretch, and I appreciate, Gladys, you're bringing this up. But I will say, the thing that has most impressed me about the administrative leadership, and that I didn't see or know, is how focused you guys have been on it from every single day I've been on the board. Whether it's in our guiding principles, whether it's in our mission statement, whether it's in something on our website, this is what you guys live by every single day. And I think I can go through chapter and verse of the things that you do for equity, both in financial metrics, but how you care about each and every one of these kids. And this is obviously one of the great learning experiences for me in getting so involved on the board. But it's also, I think, one of the things that we as a district both cherish and also understand the complications it brings, because we obviously do have people of different socioeconomic strata throughout our district. But I think, as you also said, Bob, nothing has become more apparent about how much you and your team feel about this is just the time and energy you've taken over the last, what is it now, 6-7 weeks, to make sure that we're able to provide for everybody. But just because we're trying doesn't mean that it will ever be equitable, even, I guess is the way I work, because
Right.
there is
It doesn't
but
necessarily mean.
what you are doing is trying to make sure that everybody has the access to that opportunity.
Correct.
Yeah, no, my suggestion doesn't come from the point that the district is not doing. On the contrary, I think that this is a great district. I'm so proud that my kids are here, and why we don't put it there in the guiding principles. So we are adapting the budget today. And as a psychologist, don't expect from me to talk too much about the numbers. I just focus more on the philosophy and the guiding principles. And I think that the budget is the main thing that make programs alive. And I think that will be important if the word be there. But this is just, I didn't read it in the guiding principles. It's just a suggestion from Bob. I think this is great, your presentation. Just if the word can be there, just as a suggestion. That's it.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay, any other comments or questions that specific to the budget itself?
Bob, I'll just reiterate sort of what Rena and Steve said. Obviously, the importance of having the flexibility to help the children of the district when we don't know what it's going to look like in September is a very important factor, and it's actually what should be driving this budget decision. And for me, it's what's driving my support of the budget as it's constructed, because we need that flexibility. The idea of making sure that or making sure it's possible that future boards and future budgets aren't hamstrung by a decision that we make now was also vitally important to me. And I want to make that clear to the community that any changes that we make to lessen the budget now could have impacts in the future when decisions have to be made for future boards that could be much more difficult. And I know you mentioned this before. Obviously, taking money away from the budget during the course of the year based on what Governor Cuomo may or may not decide to do is obviously feasible, whereas adding money to the budget is not. So this is, from my perspective, I agree with Steve and Rena, and I agree that this is, I think, the best course of action, understanding that there are definitely members of our community who are struggling from a physical, from a mental perspective, but also from a financial and employment situation. Taking that into account, I think we needed to look at all angles, but I think this budget as presented is really giving the best opportunity for our kids moving forward next year. So I just want to make that.
If I can, just to build on your comments, Paul, and comments from the board in general, we recognize that there are a lot of unknowns, and what's equally important in the coming weeks or months is to be able to communicate and share a framework for making tough decisions. On one hand, tonight is about setting a starting point for us based on a plan and what we hope to accomplish next year. At the same time, we know that this notion of engaged community is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
So, as these unknowns become more apparent relative to some of the decisions at the state level or the federal government, how we engage the public in the months ahead will be critically important, and how we create a process for deliberation and discussion is really the next step here. So for me, I see this as a multi-pronged effort. One, to come up with a flexible and a responsible budget. Two, to kind of reinforce to the broader community the perils, the pitfalls and challenges that lie ahead. And then to operationalize as we go along a process for involvement and for kind of a focused deliberation on priorities that are aligned to our mission statement, our objectives for learning for next year, goals and objectives, and for really then making difficult decisions if it comes to pass over time.
Bob, I want to say thank you very much for putting this all together with the rest of the team. I would say I'm in agreement with my fellow trustees in that we do need the flexibility in place. And I think this budget does do that. It is, I'm very concerned as to when we get to that point about the tough decisions. And that also leads to being in full agreement with what Gladys just said. And I do believe it would be a good idea to make sure we include that verbiage and equity as our guiding principle as we move forward, engaging those tough conversations. And just that being said, I'm in agreement with this budget as the proposed budget.
I just want to jump into and say thank you. I think given how challenging these times are, I think the budget is, you guys have worked so hard to make it work for all. So thank you for that. I do also, I want to sort of echo, I think in my couple years on the board, I think every single decision our leaders make has equity in mind, and I'm grateful for that. So I think I don't want to ignore that fact, whether we use the verbiage or not. I think working with all of you, I'm grateful every day that that is sort of just a guiding principle for all of you. So I just want to acknowledge that as well.
And I also, I just want to weigh in and say that, you know, as a board, our responsibility is to the entire system. And quite frankly, it's also a responsibility to our taxpayers who support our budget. So, you know,
Rena, I was just to say, you're right, that the system includes the taxpayers, because without that, we have nothing.
So again, you know, I think as a board trustee, my responsibility is to look at the system as a whole, to look at the needs of children across a broad spectrum of needs. It's one of the things that makes this district so special, and it's one of the things that makes it so challenging. And I think we always have to ask ourselves what benefits the system and the children, and each of them and all of them. So
agreed. And I think we have leaders that do that. So I think we should be grateful.
Agreed. And I would agree with that as well. And I would also say with the existing guiding principles, I see those reflected in all of our decisions as well. So if we can say that, then we can also include the verbiage of equity, and I would hope we can do that. But understand that equity also applies to all taxpayers, not just a selected few.
Agreed. Sam, any comments?
No, I'm good. Everybody has already said it. I'm in agreement, and thanks for the hard work, guys. Thanks.
Agreed. Okay.
One more thing, we did send out, I don't know if everybody had a chance to see it, and I have no idea at this point. It's not looking good for more federal funds, but there was a letter that the Board of Education sent out together with a letter that you can cut and paste and send to elected representatives. So if you would just take a couple of minutes and take the time to do that, it would be much appreciated.
Excellent. Thank you, Rena. So if no other board members have any comments or questions, we did get a couple questions on the email. And I'm going to read the person's name as required, no different than if a person came to a public board meeting and spoke. So this is from Rod Reef. He actually has two questions. Number one, could you please ask Sylvia to explain in a little more detail the difference between the 2019-2020 budget total and the 2019-2020 projected expenses? That's number one. I guess, Sylvia, you can answer that one first, and then the second one's a little different. So you want to answer that one first?
Sure. Let me go back to it if I can.
Sure. Thank you.
I just have to move the pictures of everyone so I can see. Oh, I have it in paper. I can look at it that way.
You did a great job, Sylvia.
The difference is really between the projected and the budget. Is that what he asked?
Let me get it. Just to, hold on one second. between the 2019 budget total and the 2019 projected expenses.
Right. So the difference is really simple. In August of each year, we ask the board to increase the budget for our use of the reserve for tax certiorari in the amount of $2 million and the workers' comp in usually about $500,000. And that is what that difference is. It's not an overrun of costs of any kind. It's just
Right.
using the reserve for tax certiorari to pay the tax certiorari payments and refunds, and the workers' comp reserve to pay the tail claims from when we stopped being self-insured.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you for that, Sylvia. And then the second question, this has to do with we had talked about impact on future year plans. Can the administration produce a high-level multi-year plan so the community can understand the potential impacts mentioned this evening?
I think one thing I said, and we had, when I first arrived, and Mr. Reeve was part of a Citizens Finance Advisory, we've built long-term models, and in the subsequent years, we had significant changes, including the tax cap formula. Each year, we anticipate and we wait in January to try to understand some indicators that play into the formula. I would say where we've done the multi-year planning is to engage in long-term enrollment projections, to understand the trajectory of TRS in future years. We try to plot out and look at average costs of employee health insurance and benefits over time to really understand what we may anticipate. But there is a limit in all of that, given the fact that I would say that close to 80 to 84% of our budget is tied into salaries and benefits. And, again, just the fluctuation in enrollment in the first half of the decade of 2010, 2020, we had a 13% increase in enrollment in a 5-year period. It's hard to plan for that and understand impact until students are arriving. So I would say that we always look beyond 1 year. As I mentioned in the beginning, we try to budget for multiple years. And certainly we account for and understand. And a perfect example is that we built into this budget, and we've talked in 2 years about a large cohort of 4th graders who will enter into the middle school, and the impact of a cohort that is the size of 480 students, and what that means in a 2-year window around anticipating a 5th team in both 6th grade and 8th grade 2 years from now, and how that plays into additional staffing, and so on and so forth.
And I also want to make the point that there have been areas that we've also looking at this through a multi-year lens and looking at trend lines. We've also made changes in the way we do things. For example, health and prescription costs, in order to bring down costs while providing the same level of service with our IT. So I think that, it's a combination of factors, including areas where we have been able to save costs.
Absolutely.
Let's say one other thing, like Sylvia and Bob have done a fantastic job over the last number of years. They've looked at this as a multi-year plan. To sit there and say, in the worst situation that we've ever occurred as a nation, like, where is your multi-year plan, when we literally don't know what's
going to happen this year.
Back to school in September.
Yep.
Well, it's really nice. It's not the issue that we should be facing right now. The issue we should be facing right now is, are we delivering a budget that's responsible to the community, it's responsible to the students, and then hopefully we will be able to get kids to school this fall. But I'm not really interested in what your 2023 budget is when we don't know if we're going to be able to have kids in classrooms this fall. We all hope that we will, but none of us know this. And I'm going to repeat this again. The work that you guys have done to go to and by the way, I'm not just referring to Bob and Sylvia, I'm referring to everybody who works in the district, who, the 7 of us who are on the board do not get paid by the district. We're here because we want to do the right thing. But every person who works in this district has done heroic work over the last 2 months, and you should all be applauded for that. But on top of the heroic work of having to redo an entire delivery system of education, you've also had to say, how are we going to pay for this? And how are we going to respect the taxpayers who are undergoing economic shocks that no one could have anticipated? But how also are we going to give our kids the best education? And you guys have done a fantastic job. And I think we should just move on and focus on this year's budget. I'm sorry.
Okay, Paul, should we, are there any more questions?
Much appreciated. So I think with that, I think we're going to move right to resolutions. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Annie, for all your work surrounding this. This is
And
obviously
Jeremy as
been-
well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jeremy, thank you so much. So I think we're going to move ahead right to resolutions. So we're going to go, so it's so adoption of the 2020-2021 budget and property tax report card. Recommended action, the Board of Education adopts the budget and property tax report card for the 2020-2021 school year in the amount of $142,609,792. This is a 1.96% budget to budget increase from the 2019-20 budget. Do I have a motion?
So
Ariana.
moved, Sam.
Ariana, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
B, a resolution to enter into an intermunicipal Village of Larchmont for resurfacing various curbs and sidewalks. Let me find it. Recommended action that in consideration of the terms and conditions of the contract, the village and the current vendor for resurfacing of various roads, curbs, and sidewalks, the village and the district agrees to the items listed below in the agreement. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second,
Second, Rena.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, Paul, excuse me, Paul, can I take this, Paul, can I take this moment to just interject because there are several resolutions that will come into play relative to capital work. I wanted to give Sylvia an opportunity to just quickly update the community about upcoming capital work projects. Can I step in there and just ask her to provide a brief update?
Sure,
before
of course. Yep.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Okay, hi, I'm gonna try to keep the dogs walking.
Yep.
Well, just to go back to the resolution that was just approved, that was actually for sidewalk work that we're going to be doing through the Village of Larchmont contract because their prices that they have are very, very good. So that will be done through our regular maintenance budget. But as far as the capital projects go, we got approval for the Murray Electric upgrade, and that was put out to bid. The bids are due back on Thursday, the 7th, day after tomorrow. We got SED approval on the high school fire alarm. That was put out to bid, and the bids are due back on Thursday, May 14th. We are awaiting approval on the work at MAS. We had to file for a waiver, and that could take a couple of weeks. We know that we're not going to do the addition this summer with the elevators, but we are hoping to do the casework and flooring replacements if we can get SED approval in time to do that. And on Chatsworth, we still don't have SED approval. You know, they are, even though we tried to fast track them, the projects, you know, they are operating at minimum capacity, and they're just not getting things approved in a timely manner. So we are not likely to do any of the capital work at Chatsworth this summer. Though that was what was planned for this summer. We have renegotiated with Triton so that they really aren't going to be here this summer, but it will allow us to bring them in the summer of 2022 without additional cost. And so we are pushing the projects back, several of them, with a lot to be done in the summer of 2021 and the balance to be done in the summer of 2022.
And then just to add to that, earlier this week, we had the opportunity to refinance existing debt service, right?
Right.
Maybe Sylvia, you want to talk about that because I think it's important to.
There was about $7.6 million remaining on the 2010 capital bonds that were issued about 10 years ago. And we did a refunding, which is kind of like refinancing your home. And we did that. We got excellent interest rates, just over 1%. And we'll end up saving the district over the course of 5 years, just under $400,000 in total.
Taxpayers. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Excellent. No, of course. Absolutely. So we'll go to C, a resolution C. So side letter agreement between the Board of Education and the Mamaroneck Union Free School District and the Mamaroneck Teachers Association concerning the retirement recognition plan. Recommended action, the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute a side letter agreement between the Mamaroneck Union Free School District and the Mamaroneck Teachers Association concerning the retirement recognition plan. Do I have a motion?
So
All right.
moved, Sam.
Ariana,
Second.
second.
Favor?
Aye.
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 D, resolution for a release and settlement agreement. Be it resolved, the Board of Education does hereby approve the terms of the release and settlement agreement involving student number 072580001. And be it further resolved, the superintendent of schools be and hereby is authorized to execute such release and settlement agreement on behalf of the district. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Second.
Sam.
Second. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Almost through, guys. E, resolution to extend an agreement with Fullerton Services Incorporated. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with Fullerton Services Incorporated for an additional 1-year period of the originally awarded pricing. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. F, resolution to extend an agreement with NZL Equipment Incorporated. Therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with NZL Equipment Incorporated for an additional 1-year period at the originally awarded price. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second, Gladys.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
G, resolution to extend an agreement with Capital Uniform Services Incorporated. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with Capital Uniform Services Incorporated for an additional 1-year period at the awarded pricing. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Gladys.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. H, resolution to extend an agreement with White Plains Glass and Mirror. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with White Plains Glass and Mirror for an additional 1-year period at the originally awarded pricing. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move.
Ariana, second.
Second.
Ariana, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. I, resolution to extend an agreement with Sound Water Treatment Incorporated. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with Sound Water Treatment Incorporated for an additional 1-year period of the originally awarded pricing. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent of schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Christian.
Second, Rena.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. J, resolution to extend an agreement with Open System Metro. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the extension of its agreement with Open System Metro for an additional 1-year period at the originally awarded pricing. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the Superintendent of Schools to execute the necessary documents to effectuate said extension for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second?
Second, Rena. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, resolution to award a contract obtained through a RFP for controlled testing services for construction work. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education herewith appoints and gives permission to enter into a contract controlled testing services for construction work associated with the 2020 bond project Special Testing Laboratories Incorporated in accordance with the recommendation letter attached. And be it further resolved, the Board of Education authorizes the board president to execute said mutually acceptable agreements on behalf of the Board of Education for the 2019-2020 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second?
Second, Christian.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. L, resolution to accept vendor contract awards and unit prices for school supplies ed data. Therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Mamaroneck Union Free School District accepts the list of awarded vendors. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second?
Second, Ariana.
All in favor?
Aye.
M, approval of the 2020-2021 Westchester Putnam School Boards Association slate of officers and members of the Board of Directors. Recommended action, the Board of Education approves the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association's proposed 2020-2021 slate of officers and members of the Board of Directors to serve as officers in the WPSBA Executive Board and instructs the district clerk to complete the ballot on its behalf. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second,
Steve.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. N, approval of legal notice and resolution establishing annual district meeting and election to be held on June 9th, 2020. Recommended action, the Board of Education approves the legal notice and resolution establishing the June 9th, 2020 annual school district meeting and election, notice of petitions and public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Sam.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rena.
No, I was going to say, Paul, do you want to say a few words about how the vote's going to be conducted? Again, just general.
Yes, let's see. So, yeah, so, yeah, we can, well, it's actually, there's information. It actually is, it actually is information at this point. But, talk about the absentee ballots. I can read it, but yeah, I mean,
No,
so,
no, I mean, I can jump in
I
if
can
you
just
want.
talk about it.
So, well, no,
No,
just
that's okay.
generally. So, so ballots are going to be, you're going to be receiving a postcard which outlines the process that's going to be followed. This is the budget vote, as we said, is as announced by the governor in accordance with his executive order, is going to be on June 9th. And all ballots are going to have to be received by the district clerk by 5 p.m. on June 9th. Everyone will receive qualified voters will receive the absentee ballot together with a stamped return envelope to mail back to the district with the instructions in the envelope. So we are not allowed to open up our school buildings as polling sites. So this is how the vote will be proceeding, and you will be receiving information in the mail.
Excellent. Thank you, Rena. So we can talk about, we'll talk about future business. So, the May 5th, 2020 Board of Education meeting. So in accordance with executive order, okay, I apologize. I'll just read this part. So in accordance with executive order 22.26, I apologize, everyone. The school district budget vote and election of trustees has been adjourned to June 9th, 2020, and will be held remotely only by absentee ballot.
Sorry
Absentee
about
ballots are
that, Paul. I should have read the announcement before I made that.
That's why I.
I
went
didn't-
through it.
Know the show,
That's
Rena.
okay.
So clearly I didn't read to the
That's
bottom,
okay.
everybody. I apologize.
That's okay. That's all right. I'll just see if there's anything you. I have to read it, so I'll just finish reading it. So in case anybody has any needs any further edification, I'm going to adjourn to June 9th, 2020, and will be held remotely only by absentee ballot. Absentee ballots are cast by a qualified voter who was unable to attend the official polling station to which the voter is normally allocated. Absentee ballots will be mailed by the school district to all qualified voters together with a postage paid return envelope. In order to qualify to vote, you must be at least 18 years of age, a U.S. citizen, resident of the district for 30 days immediately preceding the election, and a registered voter. If you are not registered, prospective voters can still register to vote with the local county board of elections by completing an online application with the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles at, I'll just read it, https://dmv.newyorkstate.gov/more-info/electronic-voter registration. I'm not repeating that. So hopefully you guys will take a look at that. The budget hearing will be held remotely during the May 26th, 2020 Board of Education meeting at 6:30 p.m. Regarding upcoming meetings, future business. So Tuesday, May 19th, time to be announced. The Board of Education meeting will be presentation of the Rockefeller Awards. Tuesday, June 2nd, time to be announced, Board of Education meeting. And actually, Tuesday, June 2nd, actually, that's actually supposed to be Tuesday, May 26th. That will be that meeting. That will be the budget hearing meeting. So there's no meeting on June 2nd. Tuesday, June 16th, time to be announced, will be the Board of Education meeting. And of course, the above budget discussion approval dates are subject to change based upon the date set by the governor for the annual school budget and trustee vote. Hopefully that will not change moving forward, but we do not know. Please take notice that until further notice, based upon notices and health advisories issued by federal, state, and local officials and pursuant to Executive Order 202.1 of the Governor of the State of New York, dated March 12th, 2020, Board of Education meeting and budget presentations will be held by Zoom video conference platform. LMC TV will be streaming the meeting live. You can view it on channel 76 for Optimum customers and channel 35 for Fios. You can also go to the LMC TV website and click Watch Now. Questions regarding items on the agenda can be submitted during the meeting to board@mamschools.org. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Sam.
Second.
Second, the person who didn't read the announcements.
Thank you, Rena. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, LMC TV. Once again, flawless. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aye.